Yo, all right. So here's the deal. All right. We talked about um, the varying finance ministers that had tried to create some sort of reform. I showed you guys all my crazy math and whatnot, but these are the two top dogs. And the people really like option one here as highlighted. All right. He was in power. He was a Swiss banker. He leaves after being forced out of his position and then is brought back. And he's considered extremely liberal and and one of the people, as in sympathetic to the third estate, calling for an end of the privileges. All right. Um, Now, this debt has been a result of many, many things. One of them being the 7 Years' War between the French and Indians versus the colonists, or really Britain, really an extension of a European war, now just in the New World. Also, we see the loans and the expense of helping the American colonies get back at the British. It was a way of righting the loss of the 7 Years' War, in which the French spent tons of money. I've shown you Versailles. I've shown you the extravagant lifestyle. It's absolutely absurd. Now, moving on, we have been really talking about the economic situation setting up the revolution. All right. You guys have already read about the storming of the Bastille. I wanted to do that reading together to really show you what's going on. All right. To explain how everything works and how to read with a bias, understanding bias. We're going to backtrack a little bit and explain some of the events prior to the storming of the Bastille and why it happened in the first place. Right now, you guys just know that heads got cut off, which is always interesting. You guys needed something to jazz you up. All right, so here we are. So the Estates General meets for the first time since 1614. It's 1789, man. That's been so long. Louis XIV didn't call on the Estates General. His grandson or his son did not, and neither does his grandson, Louis XVI, until we hit absolute chaos in 1789. All right. Now, the way that voting happened is that the third estate was always lost, right? If you're doing the first and second estates compared to the third, the first and second estates basically vote together 2-1. All right, they are also comprised mostly of nobility, aristocracy, and the clergy. All right, the clergy is the first estate, which is incredibly wealthy and has members of the royal family and of nobility. The second estate is the nobility class. They are wealthy, they receive privilege and tax breaks. All right. Now, what ends up happening is the third estate starts to break off, being inspired by the Enlightenment, and they start calling themselves the National Assembly. All right. Led by Abbé Sieyès. All right. He is a parish priest who, although part of the first estate as a clergy member, he is sympathetic to the needs of the people. He is sick of the abuses of power. He is by no means a skilled orator, but he knows how to write really good and powerful prose that's going to change the way that people think about the third estate. All right. He actually wasn't really that successful as a clergy member, but this is his moment to shine because he's pushing enlightened ideas. So early on in the revolution, this is the top dog. All right. So he writes what is called "What is the Third Estate?" And I actually gave that to you guys, but I think I have an extra version of it. And I'm going to read it with you. All right. So it says, "What is the Third Estate?" And it's a political pamphlet. And these are some excerpts, right? And so he says, "What is necessary that a nation should subsist and prosper?" And it says, "The pretended utility or usefulness of a privileged order for the public service is nothing more than a chimera, or an illusion, right? All that which is burdensome in this service is performed by the third estate. So all that basically requires labor is performed by the third estate. Who then shall dare say that the third estate has not within itself all that is necessary for the formation of a complete nation?" So what he's trying to get at is really weird. He's saying basically who is to say that the third estate can't be its own nation? It's like 97% of the population. It does all of the things that makes materials, food, agriculture, everything. It pays the taxes, essentially correcting the wrongs of the first and second estates and paying off the stupid debt of the royalty, all right? It says that the third estate is the strong and robust man who has on one arm still shackled. All right. Now, it also then goes on to a little bit of a slander of the other estates. It says, if the privileged order, nobility, should be abolished, the nation would be nothing less, but something more. Basically, he's getting at here, and I want you to think about it, is he's saying in a question, it's kind of sarcastically like, the nobility don't do diddly squat, all right? And that if they were suddenly gone, right, the nation would probably be better, all right? That's what he says, that there would actually be more. The nation would be something more. Therefore, what is the third estate? It is everything, but in everything shackled and oppressed. So the third estate is everything that makes the nation, but it's oppressed, all right? So what would it be without the privileged order? Well, everything, but in everything that is finally free and flourishing. Nothing can succeed without it. Everything would be infinitely better without the others. So far, so good. Now he's basically saying, man, is that the first and the second estates don't do anything. Notice how he doesn't really talk about the clergy, though, right? He's just getting at the nobility. Well, probably because there was a fair chunk, maybe like a third of the clergy that were rather sympathetic because they don't come from privilege and they serve the everyday person. They know what's going on. All right. So let's get to the last paragraph here. So it goes, what is a nation but a body of associates living under a common law and represented by the same legislature, etc.? It is not evident that the noble order has privileges and expenditures, which it dares to call its rights, but which are apart from the rights of the great body of the citizens. It departs there from the common law, so its civil rights make of it an isolated people in the midst of the great nation. This is truly imperium in imperia, or in other words, one state within another. The third estate embraces all that which belongs to the nation, and all that which is not the third estate cannot be regarded as being of the nation. All right. So here we go. Let's go back for a second here. Right. He's basically saying that what the noble order claims to be privileged and ability to spend, they claim as rights, but can't be because 97 to 98% of the population doesn't get those rights. So why does it get to depart from common law? It doesn't. It doesn't make any sense at all. So this isolated group of privileged people isn't part of the nation. It's just a small group that lives in a completely different fantasy world compared to everybody else. Therefore, get rid of them. And the privileges. This is ridiculous. And he's pointing out the usefulness, the utility of the third estate. Mind you, let's go back to this absurd number that we looked at for the total expenditures, which was the 227,983,716 livres. All right, cool. All right. I don't even know how much time's been going on right now. Whatever. Let's go back. All right. And we're back. Okay. So then we have the tennis court oath. All right. So when Louis decides that the Estates General is going to need to meet up, and he starts recognizing that there are some members of the first and second estate that are sympathetic to the needs and the cause of the third estate, he decides to shake up the voting order a bit and to voice some of the opinions or listen more to the third estate. However, that doesn't do everything, all right? There's still an issue. So ultimately, what happens is that basically property men of the third estate could vote, all right? So that basically allows the bourgeoisie, the men of property, who are mostly lawyers or middle-class officials and writers, people that would have read Voltaire, Rousseau, and the other philosophers, they were the ones that wrote the Cahiers des Doléances, that were arguing for fair taxation, that were arguing for a reduction of the privileges or ending the privileges, that argued for freedom of the press, regular meetings of the Estates General, and some power within the Estates General that the king would need to listen to. Those are the people that are leading this third estate. All right, so the bourgeoisie, just like in the American Revolution, are leading this revolution. All right. So what happens is that in June 1789, claiming to represent the people of France, the Third Estate claims itself to be the National Assembly after the entire what is the Third Estate pamphlet circulates, and that, what do you call it? The voting is going to take place. Now, what ultimately happened is that there is a stalemate in the decision-making process in the Estates General. Basically, that the first and second estates, according to the third estate, should vote in favor with the third estate because the third estate constitutes the largest majority, right? Doesn't end up happening. So there's a stalemate, there's some arguing, and ultimately, fearing some sort of rebellion and whatnot, the king actually locks out the National Assembly, the third estate, from their common meeting place. What happens is they meet on a tennis court. And that's where we get this famous thing called the tennis court oath, where they literally swear that they are to never, ever give up in their fight for a sound and just constitution. Right? And then, let's see, I think I actually got it up for you guys. This is so weird. I'm not used to doing these sort of things. Okay, good. Part of it, he goes and talks about then here, let's read these last parts, right? So it says the National Assembly, considering that it has been called to establish the constitution of the realm, to bring about the regeneration of public order, and to maintain the true principles of monarchy, nothing may prevent it from continuing its deliberations in any place it is forced to establish itself, right? So just this paragraph right here. Basically that nothing's going to stop the Third Estate, the National Assembly, from meeting and reforming, all right? Now, we get to here where it says, finally, the National Assembly exists whenever its members are gathered. So it doesn't have to be on a tennis court. It could be anywhere. It doesn't matter. Streets of Paris, whatever, right? And that all decrees that all members of this assembly immediately take a solemn oath never to separate and to reassemble wherever circumstances require until the constitution of the realm is established and fixed upon solid foundations. So they will not give up until they have a new constitution in which the realm of France is established and fixed on the foundations of the Enlightenment, right? Equality, fraternity, and liberty. And that oath, having been sworn, that all members and each one individually confirm this unwavering resolution with his signature. So all the people that sign this tennis court oath are, in a way, like the Declaration of Independence signers. All right. Cool. Now we'll come back. So far, so good. Things heat up. Now that's all in June. Now we're in July. People are still starving. The bread prices are rising. This is another bad year of harvest that's been plaguing France for, I don't know, 15 years. The king hasn't created any sort of relief program. And there's rumors circulating, and rumors are always dangerous when you're a leader, right? That the king will use military force to dismiss the National Assembly, right? See a lot of parallels here with the American Revolution, and as well as that foreign troops are coming to basically back up the king to massacre French citizens because there was a large group of French soldiers that identified with the Third Estate. Now, citizens decided to storm the Bastille, as we know, which was this old prison, this garrison, this fort. He played, as I mentioned, if you played, what do you call it? I can't think of it now anymore. It's a video game. Oh, Assassin's Creed Unity. I believe that was in it. Anyways, the mob was overwhelming and attacks. And your guys' job was really to try and figure out who is the aggressor and are they just in their actions. You might have a better sense after this of the continued abuse of the power, the ignorance of the royal government and the first and second estates, and the efforts to subdue the third estate and what they deserve. Now, if you look, this garrison's rather large, this fort, right? I mean, it literally stands out amongst the crowd. You got the moat. And I believe you got one of the drawbridges. This is one of the angles. Initially, it was used to um, try and protect one of the entrances of Paris, but now became a symbol of political oppression. And in tyranny and despotism. All right. So there's all of these different abilities to basically take down anybody. You've got the moat, the high walls are relatively flat or steep, so it's incredibly hard to try and breach. You pull up the drawbridge, it's going to be hard to cross, especially if it's completely flat. You're going to have to try and break in these big old thick doors. You guys heard about the the cannons firing down on the populace, all right? Now, right here looks relatively innocent, like something you might see in a children's book. Here's Big Doug looking at us, right? Um, now, there's never more than 40 inmates. By the time of the storming the Bastille, there's only about like 7. I think 2 of them were considered criminally insane. This gives us a better understanding of what's going on. You see some of the guards that might have been on the side of the Parisians out and about. We see some conflict. We see a dead body. Clearly, the artist started to rush. There's not actually that much conflict in the photo, but it looks a lot more dramatic than our little diagram, right? Here's another older interpretation of what's going on, that fighting is happening even outside of just the immediate area, where you can see it in the lower areas. You see death, despair, people fighting from houses and whatnot. Absolute chaos. All right. Here's another one. Looks awesome. All right. Um, Starts around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then poor Lene, his head got cut off. Bad stuff. Um, where do I want to go with this? Hold on. Sorry, guys. I've been up since 4. Brain's flying here. Eventually, people break through the gates. This is a slightly more heroic picture of what's going on. They're celebrating breaking in. People parading and whatnot. And you guys saw that in the primary sources. Now, let me go back. It's like the 4th of July for the French. They celebrate on June 14th. Whether or not it should actually be thought of like that is entirely different. All right. There's another wave, which is called the Great Fear, which is a series of revolts and rebellion throughout the countryside. Um, Basically, there was attacks on villages and towns, that government troops were seizing crops from the people. In turn, people are already angry and they're upset because they're inflamed by famine and fear. Um, and basically, peasants started turning on the nobles in the countryside. To find peasants set fire to old manor records and stole the grain from storehouses because, forts had extra food. And the attacks eventually died down, but it showed that this was not just an urban Parisian capital city type event, that this was a countrywide revolution. Um, Eventually, what ends up happening is that the National Assembly convenes yet again and writes what is called the Declaration of the Rights of Man in late August. And that is quite dope. August 4th, 1789, they officially end feudalism. It's done. The social hierarchy triangle that we've been talking about, it's done. It's over. Goodbye. See you later. Sayonara. All right. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. They embody many of the principles that we find in the Declaration of Independence, like all men are born equal and are equal in ability and what they deserve. And it also has, some of the contents of the English Bill of Rights, which, as we know, also inspired our U.S. Constitution, specifically the First Amendments. It explains what the purpose of government is, but more so talking about Rousseau's version, which is very confusing and very, I guess it's not communist. I believe it's communitarianism is the term. It talks about natural rights because it's inspired by people like Rousseau, who is a natural rights theorist, social contract theorist, and hits on the ideas of Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. Talks about freedom of religion and speech, although there is this kind of like anti-religion wave during the radical phase, which we'll get into. It holds on to the ideas of Voltaire, Voltaire being a Frenchman and famous Enlightenment theorist at the time, and the privileged system of feudalism is done. All right. and taxes become equal. Um, I believe I have a copy here of the rights of men. Yep, here we go. So here are some of the main articles. Ready? So the first one is that men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions may be founded only upon the general good. The general good is this thing, or the will of the people, but they don't define, and it gets very confusing. So essentially saying, like, we're going to rule by mob rule. So the line between a group of people and an absolute and complete and total true pure democracy and that of the general good are very different. Then it gets into this other part. It says the aim of all political association is the preservation of the natural and imprescriptible rights of man. These rights are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Sounds like John Locke, right? Some of our natural rights. And then, as you guys already know, the resistance to oppression. And then that the principle of all sovereignty resides essentially in the nation, that nobody nor individual may exercise any authority which does not proceed direction from the nation. That seems really confusing. But we know the nation is the third estate. So really, it's the leaders of the third estate equal the sovereign or the power, right? That liberty consists in the freedom to do anything or everything which injures no one else. Seems pretty open. So laws basically are fair. Like, you can do what you want so long as you're not hurting somebody else or that you're not hurting society, right? Nothing may be prevented which is not forbidden by law, and no one may be forced to do anything not provided for by the law. And then it goes to further trying to establish and says that law is the expression of the general rule. Every citizen has a right to participate personally or through his representative in its foundation. Kind of open ended. However, then there's more basic things like, as all persons are held innocent until they shall have been declared guilty. If arrest shall be deemed indispensable, all harnesses not or harshness not essential to the securing the prisoner's person shall be severely repressed by the law. So you are innocent until proven guilty, and no cruel and unusual punishment. So far, so good. Um, and then he talks about freedom of speech. No one shall be disquieted on account of his opinions, including his religious views, and provided their manifestation does not disturb the public order established by law. So it's like, hey, you can say what you want and you can believe in what you want, just as long as you're not bothering everybody about it. Kind of a fair idea. And it says that the free communication of ideas and opinions is one of the most precious of the rights of man, right? Every citizen may accordingly speak, write, and print with freedom, but shall be responsible for such abuses of this freedom as shall be defined by law. Woo! Nice. And that one's actually pretty straightforward. All right. I guess we'll end that one there. Let's see, where else should I keep going with you guys to bother you? Oh, they also put in a civil constitution of the clergy, completely ruining the concept of the first estate. Basically, that the different positions within the French Catholic Church are no longer to be listening to the orders of the Pope. Also, that um, all the positions are going to be elected by the people. So, who the people want to be the religious leaders will be the way that things work. Um, this was actually a pretty bad idea by the revolution. They had everybody on their side, but the French peasantry, which is by far the longest populace, is extremely conservative in religion and didn't like this. So that definitely alienated a lot of people, creating some outer hostilities, another factionalist group on the outside. So, Paris is like the hotbed, or the city areas are the hotbeds of revolution, where they're going to be the most liberal, the most radical. And then as you move further and further away, out into the countryside, you're going to see that, they might be for the revolution, but not when it comes to this case. All right. Because for them, for a lot of the people that are out in the rural areas, the experiences that they have with the clergy are a lot different than the big wealthy places I showed you in Paris. It's more smaller parishes out in the rural areas. People get along. What ends up happening is, as this legislative assembly comes together, is that we see a increasingly factionalist government within the National Assembly. So in Paris, in the National Assembly, which they also call the Legislative Assembly, we see the Jacobins, which are the left, the radicals, or the Jacobins, either way, I really could care less what you say. You have moderates or centrists, Girondists, another leader, so more towards the middle, although still very radical. You have some conservatives that are for the revolution, but want to keep it, maybe want to keep the monarchy, but keep a limited monarchy, right? And then outside, you have reactionaries who are royalists. You have the sans-culottes who are urban workers that wanted the republic, but they have a very different feel than maybe the Jacobins and the Girondists, right? You have the émigrés who are royalists that fled. So we have all these different groups that we're going to talk about. We're really going to hit on the experience of the sans-culottes and the Jacobins versus the Girondists, all right? Now, one thing that we need to know, and you guys are going to read about this, is that Louis tries to escape. Before that, what happens is there's a Brunswick Manifesto in which I'm actually going to switch these, in which that Leopold II, who is Marie Antoinette's brother, Leopold II is I believe the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, meaning he basically is king of Prussia, Austria, and a few other localities. But he's a very powerful monarch that fears revolution, although he was not excessive in his punishments. He says that he calls the revolution a plague, and he hears and he sees all these royalists that are flooding his country and other monarchies around France, other nobles leaving their wealth and their estates to seek refuge. And so he issues what is called the Brunswick Manifesto, fearing the lives of his brother-in-law and his sister, right? And he issues a threat that if the royal family were harmed, Paris would be looted and burned to the ground by the monarchies of continental Europe and even England, possibly. This convinced the French that the king was in collusion. So, Louis was now supposedly in a limited role, but this elevates the whole thing to another level. So, what happens is we have young Louis XVI trying to escape. Advisors that were fearing that tensions were going increasingly high through the roof. Louis tries to escape to the Netherlands, the Austrian side, so the northeast of France, right? But definitely more towards the center of Europe, right? They try and make him look like an urban poor and escape, but he's caught. And this just added fuel to the fire, all right? Leading to widespread massacre. Here we got a map. So in the yellow, you guys are going to, or this lightest beige color, you're going to see what we would call mostly the areas secured by the radical and moderate factions of the revolution. You have some royalist pockets where maybe membership is up for contention, and then you have the monarchies of Europe that are trying to invade. All right, and there's going to be different wars. Eventually, what we're going to see is that the National Convention abolishes the monarchy after Louis is recaptured in all of these external threats. We see the rise of the Committee of Public Safety through the Jacobin regime. They dissolved the assembly, and what had seemed like basically a successful revolution now just starts going full haywire. So when they had started, and if you guys see with my marker here, let's see if I can draw. We'll draw a little line right here, right? What started like this is a political spectrum, right? And we can do liberal radical, right? And then we can do conservative here, and we'll say middle ground, right? So they started, we're going to do this color blue for the French, right? So they started here. By the time that they make the Declaration of Rights of Man, they're getting to about here, maybe over here. And now, at this point on this slide, they're shifting all the way over here. Versus the British that are starting kind of here. And then with the revolution, after the American Revolution, end up right there. So much less radical. All right. I gotta erase that all. Way to go. Mr. H. Woo! All right. So that is that. You are done. I'm going to try and embed links and videos so you guys have to answer questions. Now, when you are done, you know what to complete. Capiche. Goodbye.